Hi there, I'm Bonnie McCaffery, and thank you so much for coming back this month for another VidCast. Now, I go and look at some people's blogs now and then, and one person's blogs that I have been following is Ruane, and Karen, your stuff is gorgeous. She does this beautiful embroidery work, and a lot of it is white, but we're going to look at some of her earlier work where she has some color and stuff. And then she'll do a little demo of how she incorporates paper and fabric into her pieces, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. Tell me a little bit about this one.
Well, when I did my university degree, I did a lot of research into how cloths played a part in the lives of humans for centuries, and how women in particular used cloths, every precious scrap they could get, to make beautiful things for the home, even though they wouldn't have a lot of money.
Right.
And I also incorporated that into the practice of swaddling infants, how they would be tightly bound in beautiful decorative cloths that often became really soiled. So this is one of my first pieces I made since my degree, and I tried to incorporate as many traditional techniques as I could to reference that care from the mother, and to use the scraps. These are vintage embroidery transfers ironed onto the silk.
Oh, so, embroidery transfers?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, so just the ones you would get and make a tablecloth from.
Right.
So I used those, and that was giving recognition to the fact that they used any old scrap they could find, anything that was spare, they never threw anything away.
Right.
And the patchwork also is a very old technique that would be constructed using a lot of scraps too.
Right.
So I've tried to combine all that into a cloth that I call a wrapping cloth. And it's also a metaphor for me for how I want to protect my children by wrapping them up and keeping them safe.
Right, and these beautiful knots.
Yeah.
What a great texture.
That's just an added embellishment, really. And I have a quote that I wrote in one of my essays while I was studying, and it's something like, the use of traditional, often time-consuming process alludes to the devotion of a mother. So that's what this is about. These really are unnecessary, but decorative, but also very time-consuming, but you do them because you want anything your children need to be the best it can be. Well, this is a traditional technique of cut work, but using vintage tablecloths, the kind of things my grandmothers would have made.
Right.
I did all the cut work. The embroidered cloth behind I didn't do. They're vintage cloths that I source. And this is a contemporary swaddling band. The shape mimics the width of a swaddling band, although the length is a lot short. I think a real swaddling band would be 4 times that length.
I'm not familiar with what a swaddling band is.
You swaddle your infants when they're born in a blanket, don't you?
And then after the blanket, this goes around the blanket?
No, well, in the 17th and 18th centuries, they would have used a band and swaddled them completely tightly.
Yeah.
So this is mimicking the shape, even though the length isn't the same, the width is the same. But inside, back to the protection of my own children, there's a quote inside here. It opens up.
A secret.
On silk, and then it fastens. This is extra security for my own children, to fasten it in, keep it private and keep them safe. This is one I made for me because I was the embroiderer without any embroidery. I was making all this stuff and
it's
spending...
like the shoemaker.
Well, yeah, spending hours and hours sewing, but not having anything actually for me.
Yeah.
So this is just purely made it for me. Everything about it is added because I wanted it on. I wanted these beads on, I wanted these beads on, I wanted to use vintage lace for ruffles.
Now, you're calling these beads, but what are they?
They're just fabric circles gathered up, stuffed with wadding and pulled together.
Yeah. So they're like a cloth bead.
Yeah, fabric beads, but actually all funky puffs, I call them.
And now we're getting to your white work. This is just gorgeous.
I've only brought 2 what I call fragments with me, because they tend to sell pretty quickly. So that's why they don't have finished edges, because if you found a fragment of an old garment, it wouldn't have a finished edge, would it? This is, again, it's a section of a wrapping cloth. That, again, cotton with ruched muslin and zillions of... I like French knots, by the way, can you tell? Well, I kind of think paper is a wonderful medium that's often forgotten. Yeah, you can create such wonderful surfaces with paper without paint, pencil, drawing implements. A needle is just as useful a drawing implement. People don't see it like that.
No.
I'm not a natural drawer in the sense of pencils and paints. And my art teacher said to me once, you are drawing but with a needle.
That's true.
So that's what I'm doing here, basically. That particular one is silk, a piece of silk that was embroidered. Applique and cut work again with lace, lots of French knots, and then embroidered onto the paper with French knots around the edge. That's mounted on a
Can I peek at the back?
Yeah, it's mounted, you can't see anything.
I can't see a thing?
You can on these.
But we'll look at another one. Okay.
Look on this one. And this is kind of like cut work on paper.
Yeah.
I've taken an area of the paper out and I actually hand perforate all these holes.
Yeah.
It takes a long time, but I like...
What do you use?
A needle.
Just a needle?
I like laborious and time consuming.
I see that.
I do actually like
but
it. I get a lot of pleasure from it.
Every hole is with love.
Well, absolutely, yeah. So you can look at the back of that one.
Okay, good. We can take a peek at the back of this one. Well, Karen, you really work very neatly. And actually, I love the tied knots.
Yeah.
It's just a whole nother texture, but absolutely beautiful.
And it's all about lace patterns. Sorry, I should have said that. It's about the lace my grandmother would have had on a table, doilies and things.
Yeah. Let me look at this one because this is really interesting.
I really like this one.
Gathered up some fabric and
I've smocked a large amount of silk, a huge amount of silk. Pulled it together and tied it tightly and then just done a very basic stitch to join it together.
Beautiful.
And then added the paper to the edge. Yeah. And these are using muslin again.
Oh, just gorgeous. All right, Karen, show us how you work with the paper and the fabric together.
Right, you really mustn't be scared of attaching fabric to paper because any holes you create under the fabric won't show on the top. So if you make a mess, it doesn't really matter.
Nobody will know.
You do have the holes on the back, but nobody's going to see them. They really don't matter. So you literally just tack it as you would cloth. Push hard. You need a sharp needle. So basically, it's just tacking. I'm sure everybody knows how to tack. So
it's just big stitches. They're about a half-inch long.
Just do them even longer. It's just to hold it in place. But when you come to do the actual embroidery, to embroider it to the paper. So
show me, what's next
after once you've tacked your piece of paper, decide what stitch you'd like to use for your decorative stitch, okay? It would be wonderful to do French knots all the way down there, but that would be very time consuming,
But that means that you would love it.
Well, I would love it, but I don't have time today. So I've done this way before. Now, when you're doing this part, don't try and come up at where the paper's visible. Always come up behind the cloth, and then if you come up in the wrong place, it doesn't matter because nobody will see.
I love that.
So basically you're just feeling from the back.
Right.
And you're coming up through the paper and through the cloth.
Right.
You're knotting the back of your thread, and then you go down into the paper because that way you can be precise when you're going down because you can see where the hole's going to be.
Exactly. So it's just little straight stitches.
So little straight stitches as are in this piece here, and then obviously you do that all the way along, take the tacking out, and you have your first piece of patchwork applied to the paper.
Right.
So then, when you've done that, when you have your piece tacked completely to the paper, you will turn it over to the back and you'd have guidelines on where you can put the pattern in on the front. So then I would draw on the back and punch the holes through. And when your patchwork is attached, if you can see, we have the decoration going into the point.
Into the indents, right.
Into the point. We'll pretend that this is properly attached. So I know that I have a space there to put these little bunches of French knots there.
Right.
So I wouldn't need to draw that because those holes go down from the front. Now I have a pillow here because you have to prick into something very soft. Well, I know that I'm going to need a little group here of maybe 4 or 5 French knots.
And so in these holes you're going to put knots.
Then I'm going to do French knots.
So now you have the hole on the back that shows you exact.
So that's the hole there. You come up, you do your French knot.
How many times do you go around?
3 times round,
1, 2, 3.
and then in through the same hole, and your knot will stop it going right the way through. Once you have that on, all these indentations decorated with French knots, then you have your next space to draw your pattern for this on the back, and these will guide you where the French knots have been to do that on the back. So I tend to make 4 dots like that, and then little semicircles like so. Okay?
Right.
And then sharp needle for this from the back. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then French knots in each of these marks. Sorry.
French knots or holes?
No, holes.
Okay,
sorry, 4 holes perhaps, 4 or 5 on each little.
And you try to space them evenly.
Space them evenly.
Yeah. What kind of stitch is this?
This, I believe, is called spider's web stitch. So basically, it's having 8 holes and a hole in the centre. So in a circle, okay. You need a sharp needle for this point to get your threads in place.
Okay.
So you come up one and go down on the one directly opposite.
Right.
You do that for all 8 holes. Right, so then you come up the one in the centre.
Right.
So you're coming up in the centre of the threads now.
Right.
So then I just tend to take a little stitch under them all.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. And again, then that gathers them all together in the middle to keep them.
Oh, to keep them tight
them in
together.
place.
Right.
So then you need to swap needles. You need a blunt needle for this part.
Because you don't want to be piercing the threads.
Yeah, like a tapestry needle, because you're going to be weaving in and out. So
right.
if you had a sharp needle, you'd be shredding your threads. So you go under the one behind to the right, go under that, and then under the next one along to the left.
So under 2.
You're going back over the one on the right.
Correct.
And then under it and under the one on the left. So now I'm coming up on that second one. I went over that one and under. Now I'm coming up on the left of that one.
Mm-hmm.
So go back to the right over that one and under again.
I get it.
Okay, so you're weaving with your needle.
So
really.
You're making a loop over the thread.
A loop over the one on the right and coming under the next one along so that you can loop back over that one.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful.
Okay, and you just keep doing that until it's finished. You see it coming together now, forming in the middle.
So do you just keep going around
just
and around
keep
until
going.
it's full?
Just keep going until it's full.
Not any specific number, but until it looks right.
No, it depends on what thread you're using. A thinner thread will take a longer time.
Right.
This is cotton pearl, which is virtually what I use all the time, along with cotton embroidery. This has got a very high shine on it.
Cotton
This is shiny, that's more matte. And it's a little bit thinner.
I've never heard of this before.
It's lovely to work with.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
You have these beautiful little books. Now tell me about these books.
Even on a natural drawer or painter, I do like to doodle. And it's nice to have something nice to doodle in. So I started making these to sell. And they're just very high quality watercolour paper. And I put extra paper in for writing on or making notes and little stitch samples. So we have more stitch samples. For inspiration, perhaps.
What a wonderful idea.
More images of my work.
I love that. You also have these little books that are picture books of your stuff.
That's right. This is just merely for inspiration. I don't expect people to copy them. They're all copyrighted pieces of work. But maybe if it just gives you an idea of how to use a particular stitch or a particular technique.
Right. And I have to say, your blog is also a great source of inspiration.
Thank you. And then for larger sketchbooks, if you have a larger sketchbook, you want to incorporate some embroidery in. There's these tiny sample cards with pieces of embroidery in, and then a card that's wrapped in threads to match the embroidery.
Isn't that neat?
So,
now, Karen, let me ask you a question. What is your philosophy of life?
I just think you've got to make the most of it.
Make the most of it.
Get over anything that might come your way.
Get over it.
Yeah, and just keep going. Yeah,
thank you so much for doing this with me.
I
think people are going to love seeing this, and you will want to go to Karen's blog and see her stuff there. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And thank you all for coming. I hope you'll come back next month to see what I have for you then. Thanks for being with me.